Air conditioning is a popular option on AMC, Jeep, and Renault vehicles, and many of these vehicles are equipped with the Sankyo air conditioning compressor. This training release will show you how the Sankyo compressor operates. We will also show you how quickly and easily the compressor can be serviced. Let's see how the Sankyo compressor operates. As you know, the compressor is the heart of any air conditioning system. It provides the muscle to pump the refrigerant through its endless cycles. The current trend in downsizing automobiles calls for lighter, more efficient air conditioning compressors. The Sankyo compressor is a compact, high-capacity unit currently being used on some AMC, Jeep, and Renault 4- and 6-cylinder vehicles. The Sankyo is a 5-cylinder rotary compressor featuring a unique wobble plate design. This design provides a high-capacity compressor which is lightweight and small in size. The key to the compressor's operation is the use of this fixed ball instead of a crankshaft. When the air conditioning is operated, the magnetic clutch, which is powered by a V-belt or a serpentine drive belt, engages and operates the cam rotor. The cam rotor drives the wobble plate, which rotates on the ball and activates each of the 5 pistons. Notice that the 5 pistons are connected to the wobble plate with ball and socket-type connecting rods. To reduce weight, the Sankyo compressor is constructed of lightweight, high-strength aluminum. Only the front housing and the cylinder wall liner, which is cast into the compressor body, are cast iron. Another important feature of the Sankyo compressor is the static clutch hub on the front housing. This permits the magnetic coil and pulley to be mounted on the compressor body and not on the shaft itself. With this design, there are less service problems with the clutch bearing and less field replacement of the compressor shaft seal, because side thrust pressure from the drive belt is placed on the compressor and not on the shaft. Because the main components of the compressor body cannot be serviced, this training release will cover just 4 service procedures. These procedures include 1. Checking the compressor oil level and oil replacement procedure. 2. Clutch removal, installation, and air gap adjustment. 3. Shaft seal replacement. And 4. Cylinder head, valve plate, and gasket service. You will need some special tools to perform these service procedures. We will identify these tools as they are used. When there has been an obvious loss of compressor oil, or a compressor component has been replaced, you must check the oil level. On AMC and Jeep vehicles, you can check the oil level with the compressor installed on the engine. First, isolate the compressor from the rest of the air conditioning system. Consult the appropriate AMC or Jeep technical service manual for the proper procedure. Now, remove the oil filler plug. Look through the oil filler plug hole and rotate the front clutch plate to position the piston connecting rod in the center of the plug hole. This step is necessary to clear the path for the oil level checker. Next, insert the special oil level checker through the oil filler hole. Make sure it is inserted to its full depth. Now remove the checker and count the number of increments covered with oil. When properly filled, the level should be between 4 and 6 increments. If the level is not correct, add or remove oil, 1 ounce at a time, until the mid-range value is reached. Last, replace the oil filler plug and torque to 6 to 9 foot-pounds. To check the compressor oil level on Renault vehicles, the compressor must be removed from the engine. Consult the appropriate Renault service manual for the proper procedure. Once the compressor is removed, check the oil level following the same procedure for AMC and Jeep vehicles. When replacing a compressor component, or when a compressor is to be replaced with a new Sankyo compressor, the oil must be drained and replaced as follows. First, isolate the compressor. On Renault vehicles, you'll have to discharge the system. Then remove the compressor from the engine. On AMC 4-cylinder models, you'll have to remove the standpipes. Next, drain the oil from the old compressor. Before you remove the oil filler plug, first drain the oil that will flow from either the discharge or suction port. Now remove the oil filler plug. Drain and measure the remaining oil. If you are replacing a compressor component, complete the service. Then measure new oil equal to the amount drained from the compressor. Now refill the compressor with the new oil. If you are replacing the old compressor with a new Sankyo compressor, first drain and measure the oil from the old compressor. Now drain the oil from the new compressor. Next, measure new oil equal to the amount drained from the old compressor, and refill the new compressor with new oil. Use the oil level checker to be sure the oil level is between 4 and 6 increments. You must flush the entire system if the compressor has failed internally or if you detect aluminum or other particles when draining the oil. Failure to flush the system will result in internal failure of the new compressor. Consult the appropriate AMC or Jeep technical service manual for the proper procedure. Because the Sankyo compressor is a high-speed compressor, maintaining the proper oil level is very important. Too much oil, however, decreases the cooling efficiency. The second service procedure we'll cover is clutch service. All clutch service operations should be performed on the bench. You should first isolate the compressor. On Renault vehicles, you will have to discharge the system before removing the compressor. Then remove it from the engine and check the oil level as we did earlier. Now, before we remove the clutch, let's take a look at the clutch assembly to become familiar with the parts. There is the magnetic coil, the coil snap ring, the pulley and bearing assembly, the external front housing snap ring, the internal bearing snap ring, the front clutch plate, and the shaft nut. On 4-cylinder AMC engines, you'll have to first remove the standpipes and drain the oil from the suction or discharge ports. Now, clamp the compressor in a vise by the mounting ears. Do not clamp directly on the compressor body. Begin removing the clutch by inserting the 2 pins of the special front clutch plate holder into any 2 holes in the front clutch plate. Hold the front clutch plate stationary and remove the shaft nut. Remove the front clutch plate with the special puller. Line up the puller center bolt with the compressor shaft. Now finger tighten the 3 puller bolts into the threaded holes on the front plate and remove the front plate. Next, remove the shaft key by tapping it lightly with a hammer and punch. Remove the internal bearing snap ring by using internal snap ring pliers. And remove the external front housing snap ring by using external snap ring pliers. You will notice that these snap rings have a flat edge and a beveled edge. When they are installed, be sure and position them so the flat edge is toward the compressor and the beveled edge is away from the compressor. Then remove the pulley using the special tool. Insert the lip of the jaws into the internal bearing snap ring groove. Now place the shaft protector over the exposed compressor shaft and install the remover adapter by aligning the thumb head bolts with the puller jaws and finger tighten the bolts. Now turn the puller center bolt clockwise and remove the pulley. To remove the stationary magnetic coil, you first loosen the coil lead wire from the clip on top of the compressor front housing. Using external snap ring pliers, remove the snap ring holding the coil and remove the coil. This completes the clutch removal procedure. To install the clutch, you simply reverse the removal procedure. There are a few important steps you should remember, however. When installing the coil, make sure the coil flange protrusion matches the hole in the front housing. This alignment prevents coil movement and correctly locates the coil lead wire. Now install the coil snap ring. To install the pulley and bearing assembly, you must first install the internal bearing snap ring. It is necessary to install this snap ring to hold the bearing in its proper position on the pulley. Now place the pulley on the compressor front housing hub and, using a suitable driver, such as a 2x4 and a hammer, Tap the wood until the pulley is driven down far enough to allow the external front housing snap ring to be reinstalled. Next, reinstall the external front housing snap ring. To install the front clutch plate, install the compressor shaft key and align the front plate keyway with the compressor shaft key. Now, using the clutch face installer, tap the front plate onto the compressor shaft until it bottoms on the clutch shims. Listen for a distinct change in sound when the front clutch plate bottoms. Next, install the shaft nut and torque to 25 to 30 foot-pounds. When installing the clutch, it is necessary to check and adjust the air gap. Using a feeler gauge, measure the air gap between the front clutch plate and the pulley. It should be between 16 thousandths and 31 thousandths of an inch. If the air gap is not consistent around the entire circumference, you should use a screwdriver and lightly pry up at the minimum variations. Then, using a rubber or plastic mallet, tap down at the maximum variations. If the air gap does not meet the specifications, you'll have to remove the shaft nut and front clutch plate again. The air gap is determined by the spacer shims located behind the felt ring in the front housing clutch hub. Using snap ring pliers, remove the felt ring. Clutch shims can then be added or removed as required. To remove the clutch shims, use an O-ring hook and a small screwdriver to prevent the shims from binding. Now install the felt ring, the front clutch plate, and the shaft nut. Measure the air gap once again to see if it now meets specifications. The next service procedure we'll cover is replacement of the shaft seal. Shaft seal replacement should be done on the bench. Remember to first isolate the compressor. On Renault vehicles, you will have to discharge the system. Then remove the compressor from the engine. On AMC 4-cylinder engines, you'll have to remove the standpipes. Also, drain and check the oil level as we did earlier. Then clamp the compressor in a vise by the mounting ears. Now, let's take a look at the shaft seal assembly before we begin the service operation. Notice the shaft seal, the O-ring, the shaft seal seat, the snap ring, and the felt ring. To replace the shaft seal, the first step is to remove the front clutch plate as we did earlier in the clutch service procedure. It is not necessary to remove the pulley, but for easier viewing, the pulley has been removed in these examples. Now, remove the shaft key. And using snap ring pliers, remove the felt ring. You can now remove the clutch shims. Next, using internal snap ring pliers, remove the retaining snap ring for the shaft seal seat. Then remove the shaft seal seat using the special seal seat remover and installer. Remove the shaft seal O-ring using the O-ring hook. When you remove the O-ring, be careful not to scratch the O-ring groove with the hook. Now, using another special tool, the seal assembly installer remover, insert the tool into the seal bore. Then press down against the seal spring and twist the tool clockwise until you feel it engage the slots in the seal cage. Now simply lift out the seal and cage assembly. To replace the shaft seal, first clean the seal cavity thoroughly. Use a lint-free or synthetic cloth and clean refrigerant oil. Then blow out the cavity with clean, dry air. Next, place the special seal sleeve protector over the compressor shaft. Now, dip the mating surfaces of the replacement seal in clean refrigerant oil. Be careful not to touch the new seal lapping surfaces. Even the body oils and salts from your fingers will cause seal damage. Continue with the new seal installation by inserting the tool and seal firmly into place in the compressor seal cavity. Now, twist the tool counterclockwise to disengage the tool from the seal and cage assembly. With the new seal in place, continue to replace the remaining shaft assembly parts. Don't use any of the old parts. Use only new seals, O-rings, seats, and felt rings. First, Coat a new O-ring with clean refrigerant oil and carefully place it in the sealed groove with the O-ring hook. Be careful not to scratch the O-ring groove with the hook. Next, coat the seal seat with refrigerant oil and, using the special seal seat remover and installer, install the seat by pressing it lightly against the seal. Reinstall the shaft seal seat retaining snap ring next. Be sure the flat side is located toward the compressor and the beveled edge is away from the compressor. It may be necessary for you to lightly tap the snap ring to position it securely in its groove. Now remove the seal sleeve protector and install the clutch shims. Next, tap a new felt ring into place. Complete the replacement procedure by installing the shaft key and the front clutch plate. Then install the shaft nut and torque it to 25 to 30 foot-pounds. Also, remember to check the air gap. It must be between 16 thousandths and 31 thousandths of an inch. If it isn't, you must follow the clutch service procedure discussed earlier. The last service procedure we will discuss is for the cylinder head, valve plate, and gasket service. Again, it is recommended that you perform these service procedures on the bench. First, isolate the compressor and remove it from the engine. On Renault vehicles, you'll have to discharge the system. On AMC 4-cylinder engines, you'll have to remove the standpipes. Now, drain and measure the oil level as we did earlier. Then clamp the compressor in a vise by the mounting ears. Before we remove the head, let's first look at the cylinder head and valve plate assembly. This includes the cylinder head gasket, the valve plate, and the valve plate gasket. To remove the head, remove the 5-cylinder head cap screws. Inspect the cylinder head for damage. If it is damaged, you should discard the head. Next, use a small hammer and a gasket scraper to tap the outer edge of the cylinder head until it separates from the valve plate. Although the gasket is installed without adhesive, the cylinder head gasket will normally stick to the valve plate. You can now remove the valve plate by positioning a gasket scraper between the edge of the valve plate and the cylinder block. Lightly tap the valve plate loose. Inspect the reed valves and discharge retainer. If any part of the assembly is damaged, replace the valve plate. If the valve plate or the cylinder head are to be reused, carefully remove any gasket materials using the gasket scraper. Be careful not to scratch or damage the cylinder block, head, or valve plate surfaces. To install the replacement valve plate gasket, coat it with clean refrigerant oil and align it with the locating pin holes and oil orifice in the compressor cylinder block. Next, install the valve plate so the discharge valve, retainer, and nut point away from the cylinder block. Align the valve plate locating pins to the pinholes in the compressor block. Now install the cylinder head. First, coat the valve plate with clean refrigerant oil and position a new head gasket over the valve plate locating pins. Align the head gasket holes with the oil equalizer and orifice opening. Be sure to position the cylinder head so the suction and discharge ports are pointing up and in line with the oil filler plug on the compressor body. Last, insert the cylinder head cap screws and finger tighten. Then torque the cap screws to 22 to 25 foot-pounds following the torque sequence shown. Then replace the compressor oil. This training release has covered the operation of the Sankyo air conditioning compressor. It has also shown you how quickly and easily the compressor can be serviced. You learned how to check the compressor oil level for both in-service and replacement compressors. You also learned the service procedures for the clutch removal, clutch installation, and adjusting the clutch air gap. We also covered the procedures for replacing the shaft seal. And last, cylinder head, valve plate, and gasket service. You should now be prepared to perform the service procedures for the Sankyo compressor. This training release includes this comprehensive reference. Consult this book for detailed step-by-step service procedures and a handy troubleshooting guide.